What's up guys, this is Joseph from Zhiyun Media, here to give you guys my full review of the Zhiyun crane, the Dose. Alright guys, welcome to the pseudo studio setup for today. Like I said, I want to give you guys my final review-worthy thoughts of the Crane 2. So the first thing I want to hit on is build quality. This is definitely something that I touched on in the first impressions video. Not a whole lot here guys. Like I said, if you use any of Zhiyun's gimbals before, the build quality is fantastic. They're not paying me to say that. I truly believe that. And so the same is here too. Nothing has changed since the first impressions video. I've definitely taken on a lot more shoots. It's always stayed in its case. I tend to baby a lot of my video equipment. But like I said, I put it through its paces. It stayed in its case. Not a scratch, not a scar, not anything on there. So as far as build quality is concerned, you guys really have nothing to worry about. Next thing I want to talk to you guys about is packability. Now this is something that was actually brought to my attention by a commenter on the first impressions video, and they were asking me how easy is it to pack the gimbal flat. And it's not something I really thought about, especially with the Crane M, because it's so small it can really just, you can throw it anywhere. But it is something that has kind of arisen as not really a point of concern, but something to think about if you're not going to keep it in its case 24/7. With the Crane 2, it is much bigger, we already know that, and so I've balanced several different camera setups with the gimbal, but to get it to pack back into the case flatly, I do have to adjust, I guess, the back roll motor a little bit just so that it'll stay in its case. But I will say this, Zhiyun gives plenty of room inside the case so that you can kind of, it doesn't have to be perfect the way it came in the box when you got it. You can kind of move things around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is something to keep in mind if you plan on not using the case, which I wouldn't recommend because it's a pretty big gimbal. But if you don't plan on using the case, you may have to adjust one or two or three of the motors in order to get it to pack as flat as you may want it to be. So I have two camera setups. I have the GH5 and the A6500, and those are both setups that I'm using with the Sigma 18 and 35. And one thing that people asked me to touch on was ease of, I guess, balancing in a sense. So I haven't had any problems personally with balancing gimbals. I've heard plenty of comments about the struggles people have with balancing gimbals, and it's not necessarily an easy task. I'm not trying to say that, but it can be made much easier, and I've made it much easier by sort of making some notches or increments. I don't really know what to call it in the gimbal itself. So what I use is I take like a small flathead screwdriver and I make some little marks in the metal. The reason I did that was that if I'm taking the gimbal out of the case, I'm on the go and I may want to change up different camera setups, what I want to be able to do is to easily see exactly where I want to move the arm. And so that way it makes it very easy for me to find exactly where I want it to be, move it to that place, tighten the knobs, get my camera ready to go, and I'm up and running, ready to get the shot. And what I've done is I've made it for two camera setups. So on the top, I've made the little marks for the A6500 setup with the Sigma. And on the bottom, the underside of the arm, I've made it for the GH5 with the Sigma. I may, in fact, make another video about how to balance these different camera setups on the gimbal. It's a question that I get asked all the time. I know I've seen plenty of videos out there, but I still get the question asked a lot. So if enough of you guys want to see me do it with the Crane 2, I'll be more than happy to do it. Next thing I want to talk about is size. Now this is something that I did touch on in the first impressions video, but I didn't give you guys, I guess, enough context, I guess. I didn't compare it to anything. So this is what this shot is here for. I want to show you guys exactly how it compares in size to the Crane M. So here's the Crane M, and then here's the Crane 2. Yeah, like I said, this is a very big jump in size. You can definitely see that, obviously you saw in my first impressions video that I wasn't really necessarily struggling with the size adjustment, but it was the most jarring thing to me. And it's the first thing you're going to notice when you pick up this gimbal. Next thing is the phone app, the interface that Zhiyun has employed in their app on iPhone and Android that allows you to connect to your gimbal, see some useful stats to control it and things like that. That feature has been carried over from their previous gimbals over to this one. And there's really not a lot to see here, guys. It's the same old, same old. They do have a new app that they've been pushing. I guess this has kind of been in play for a while. This is the first time I was using the app. I've been using the Zhiyun Assistant app. Now they have the app called Zhiyun Play, I believe. Let me look it up real quick. Yeah, it's called ZY Play. So there's two different apps. Now I'll show you some shots here. But if you look at the apps, they do exactly what you want them to do. The Zhiyun Assistant kind of gets straight to the point. It gives you your battery levels, access controls. It's mainly like a remote control app. That's all it is. I believe with the Zhiyun Play app, there's a camera interface for your phone if you were to use it with some of their smartphone gimbals, and maybe some additional features that are specifically tailored to the specific gimbal. So it seems like Zhiyun is catering users. They want users to specifically use the ZUI Play app, so maybe at some point they will discontinue the Zhiyun Assistant app. I'm not really sure, but at the moment, that may cause a little bit of confusion just to kind of figure out what users should be using, I guess. Next thing I want to talk about is battery life. Now, Zhiyun has a lot to live up to with the Crane 2. Honestly, I've had the Crane-M, like I said, for 10 months. I can count on two hands, maybe even one hand. I honestly don't think I've charged the batteries more than 5 times over the 10 months that I've had it. And that's insane considering that I filmed so many weddings over the summer and the battery life is just fantastic. And so in my opinion, they had a lot to live up to with the Crane 2. I've had it for a month and a half now. I've charged the batteries, I believe, twice. So if you want to maybe compare that, maybe the battery life is a little bit less. But like I said, I'm not going to knock them for that for 2 reasons. Number one, they claim 18-hour battery life, which is just insane. I'm not sure, I haven't really tested the numbers, but that's a lot. That should last you a significant amount of time. And number two, this is a bigger gimbal, which requires some more powerful motors. They do include more batteries, but directly comparing, I guess, the battery life to the other gimbals, it's a different setup. So it's obviously going to draw more juice. I can imagine you probably charging this maybe twice a month or something like that, and especially if you're using the gimbal on a lot more shoots, more often than I am personally. Maybe once a week, and even at that, that's still something that's not that bad. Once a week for a gimbal to last through all of your shoots, to me, that's a win-win. So like I mentioned before, guys, I have 2 setups that I'm mainly using with the Crane 2. So I have the GH5 and also the A6500, and they're both paired with the Sigma 18-35. So I've interchangeably used each setup just to see which fares better. But I do want to show you guys some differences in some walking shots, some fast walking shots, and then some running shots. And both of those, I'm going to show you the differences between when I am not paying attention to my Z-axis movement and when I am, and when I'm trying to purposely dampen that movement so that the shots come out smoother. So just a couple more things before I close this video out, guys. I want to give you my final verdict on who I think this gimbal is for. Now, I'm just going to flat out say, if you're an owner of a small mirrorless camera such as the A6300, 6500, some of the smaller Panasonic cameras, this gimbal is not for you guys. This is complete overkill for that kind of setup, especially if you're using small camera, native glass. Those are really small setups, meant to be small, meant to be compact for traveling. I would actually point you guys towards either the Crane-M, if that's something that's feasible, or if you definitely just need something else, maybe the Crane V2. Now, if we're moving on to the Canon DSLRs, GH5, A7S2, A7R2, even some smaller cinema bodies like FS5, Red Raven. These are some camera setups where maybe you should start considering this. The Ronin-M really is the only other option as far as considering what can handle the weight of all of those cameras that I just listed. And so I guess up until this point, it's been the most versatile to be able to handle all those. But the Crane 2 is sitting at an interesting entry point. Number one, it's $250 cheaper than the Ronin-M. And number two, it doesn't have the problem of the Ronin-M being able to sit it wherever you want to. Everybody has trashed the Ronin-M about its incapability of being able to sit it anywhere without the stand. My opinion, if I were given the chance to use either one, I would go for the Crane 2 right now, just based solely on the fact that if I were having to definitely pay for it out of my own pocket, number one, I'm a cheap college student. I'm trying to, save money wherever I can. The Crane 2, 7-pound weight limit, $250 cheaper than the Ronin-M. That's where the Crane 2 comes in and sort of has an upper hand on the Ronin-M. One interesting thing to note though is honestly two things, I guess. One, I really want to see how the dual handle grip affects the use of the Crane 2. Zhiyun, I've been in talks with them. They've already officially announced this as an accessory. It's coming soon. I didn't have a chance to be able to take it, I guess, for a test drive for this review, but they said it's coming. And also the thing that I would kind of look at, especially if you're a potential buyer, is the follow focus wheel that important to you? Now, I purposely haven't touched on it before in this video for this very reason. Me personally, it's not something that I'm going to buy the gimbal for. Does it work? Let me show you what it does with the camera setups I have. As you can see, it's not controlling the focus of either one of them. So the question arises is if that's something that you really want to be getting the gimbal for, I guess that's fine. But at that point, you would probably have a Canon camera setup, I would assume. If you really want a good autofocus, you'd have a Sony camera setup like A7R2 or A6500. And at that point, you're not really worried about focus. The reason why it doesn't matter to me is that when I'm in the middle of a wedding shoot, I don't want to be focusing on the couple, if that makes sense. Like, I want to be mentally focused on capturing what's happening with the couple. And so that's why for me, whether or not the follow focus wheel works or not, it's not really that big of a deal to me. If I were to upgrade to Canon at some point, maybe, okay, maybe. But at that point, I'd rather get a camera that's compatible with dual pixel autofocus from Canon and still not have to worry about it. So I'll give Zhiyun credit for thinking outside of the box and trying to be innovative. For me, it's really not going to make or break the self. It seems like there's some additional software and possibly hardware updates that have to be done in order for this to work properly with Sony and Panasonic cameras. I haven't heard a lot on the Panasonic end, but I have heard with the Sony cameras that actually both, a software update will need to be issued on Sony's end, so they'll have to update some of their cameras to support this. And also some software and possibly some hardware additions will be needed to made to the Crane 2. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like I said, it wasn't a deal breaker for me. I'm not going to use that feature. So sorry I don't have a whole lot of insight as far as the matter. I don't own a camera that's currently compatible with it at the moment. But there are a couple of videos that do touch on the compatibility with Canon cameras. So if you want to check those out, I would definitely check those out if you do own Canon cameras, and that'll give you a little bit more insight as far as is this purchase worth it for Canon camera users. So that's my thoughts on the Crane 2, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. And remember, guys, we've all got a passion. Go out there and find yours.